Our speakers tonight are Nicola Scott and Lucy Ambler. Nicola is a research manager at Rethinking Economics, and she investigated the political economy of GM crops for her PhD research and published articles for Ethical Consumer about corporate social responsibility. She's taught social sciences at universities, she's taught social science students at universities to think critically about what they study. Nicola's also been an environmental activist for over 15 years. Lucy is a researcher at Rethinking Economics, and she's a passionate feminist and campaigner for menstrual health rights, following her previous research projects in East Africa. We're really excited to be joined by both of our speakers tonight, and I'm going to hand over to them. If you've got any comments or things that you'd like to share, there is a chat at the bottom of the screen. I will be around to sort of keep an eye on things, but yeah, welcome to our event.
Great, thanks very much, Alice. Yeah, just want to make clear, so I'm Nicola Scott, as Alice mentioned. Just want to make clear it's really a two-way thing, this event tonight. So please do add questions, please do interrupt if you need to. We're a small group tonight, so don't feel like we're the experts. We are in no way the experts. I think everyone here has some experience of economics in some way. So yeah, please do add any questions. And what I'd like to hear first of all, before I go into some information about the book, is I'm just going to put it in the chat, and you can put your answer in the chat to the question I'll put, or just say it out loud. Unmute yourself and just say it out loud. Okay, so what brought you here tonight to this event? So please feel free to unmute yourself. Yeah. Does anyone want to go? Tanya, would you like to say?
I've worked for sustainability and for future generations for many years now, so I was just intrigued. And I have to fess up, I've got the book. I haven't had a chance to read it yet, but I'm really, really excited. I really want to.
Yeah, don't worry. To be honest, I mean, I haven't read the whole book again since submitted it to the publishers. I've read bits, so don't worry about that. But I'm glad you brought it. Thank you very much. Okay, so let's see. We've got some answers on the chat as well here. So we've got Emma. Yeah, very interested in class and economics in the 21st century. Great. Yeah. And Anna said, I'm interested in finding an alternative to the current system, one that puts people first. Well, that's great. And I'm really glad that you said these things, all of you, because that's what our book hopes to do. Please do continue. If you haven't yet put your comment, and the planet, please do continue to put that into the comment tabs there, the chat, I mean. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to share my screen. And I will put it in full view mode, I think. Yeah. So could you, you can put this in the chat or say it out loud. What do you see or think of when you hear the words economist and economics? There's no right or wrong answer. It's not a test. Be as honest as you want to be. What do you see when you think of the word, when you hear the words economist and economics? Okay, so we've got some answers coming in. I'll just have a look at them in chat as well. So, yep, capitalism and growth, monetized, yeah, great. Anything else about who do you see as well? You think when you see the word economist, who is in your mind? Can you describe that or say it out loud if you want? You can unmute yourself. Conservative. Okay. People removed from people. Yeah. Okay. Pale, pale and stale. White men in Northern Europe. Okay, you've definitely come to the right event tonight. This is great. Okay, lovely. I mean, I'm not saying lovely. Yes, white male and pale people are all economists. Yay! Not saying that, but yeah. I mean, this is why we wrote the book. So yeah, and just to confirm this, when we've done some focus group research with high school students, this is what they came up with as well. So the picture on the left here, yeah, white middle-aged men, got a suit on, yeah, okay. And so the thing is, when some of this, so Rethinking Economics is a student movement. Essentially, it was set up, just to give you background information for why we did this book. It was set up after the financial crisis happened just over 10 years ago, nearly 15 years ago now, actually. And students at studying economics at Manchester, which is where I teach, they were like, well, why aren't we learning anything about what caused this crash? You know, economics is still just focused on making money and growth and all this sort of stuff. So some of these students also said, well, okay, why aren't there many people that like me? You know, if I'm a woman, you know, why, when we read books in economics, why are they mainly from men? And so from this anecdotal evidence, we thought it'd be really good just to delve into that deeper and do a bit more research and hear from more students, hear from professionals in economics that are underrepresented. So today, some of the things we're talking about are things like, well, what's the barriers to studying and working in economics? What are the experiences of those who study or work in economics? And there's some recommendations. But essentially, what our book does, it makes a call to diversify, decolonize, and democratize economics. And we will explain a bit more about that as we go on. But please do interject. If you've got questions, please put them in the chat, okay? So just, I've got a few graphs. I'm not an economist per se, I'm more of a qualitative research, but this is just to really visualize what we're talking about when we're saying who does and does not study economics and how that impacts the sort of policies we come out with in the discipline. Okay, so first of all, what I want you to do, another little activity. So you've got here, yep, map of the world. Some countries are bigger than others. The colours do not represent anything. It's more just to show you which, you know, the different areas in the world. What do you think this map represents? And you can put it in the chat or please unmute yourself. So what does that map? Why are some countries big and some countries tiny? Okay, let's see. Wealth, okay. Any more ideas as well? So concentration wealth. Give you another 10 seconds. GDP, all good answers. Makes sense, doesn't it, looking at the map? One more to come through, anyone? Okay, so this map, it actually represents people's countries, like where people are from if they won the Nobel Prize for Economics. Okay, so apparently there are very few people in South America who are really good economists. Likewise in Africa, you know, there's hardly anyone there. So the Nobel Prize has been going on, I think it's since 1968 or 69. So in what, 50, 55 something years or something. Yeah, we've got most prize winners. So most people seem to be amazing, you know, producing really good research, innovative research, best in the world. Primarily come from North America and Western Europe, okay? Now, this is important to recognise because when we look at who produces economics and who thinks of ideas, their background does have a factor in that. So some of our research has showed that. For example, women economists are more likely to look at things like the care economy and care work and unpaid care, more so than men. And there are other areas where men are more likely to look at in terms of more sort of business side, you know, making money areas than women are. Okay, so it's really important to know that, yeah, at the moment, certainly in the UK and in North America, economics is very undiverse and it's very not inclusive. And just to back that up as well, I've got a few sort of data slides. I won't, you know, there won't be too many of them, so don't worry about that. Okay. Okay, just trying. Okay, so it's like, as I said, it's important as well before I go on to the other graphs that this is, when we look at world leader backgrounds, they're very important in today's world, isn't it? We can see economics. World leaders often have economics as one of their studies, what they've studied at uni. I think the vice president of Kamala Harris, she studied economics at uni originally before she became a lawyer. And like you guys said earlier, when our government, you thought of the Conservatives or something when we saw an economist. So what they learn and who they are, it does reflect on the sort of policies they come out with. And we've never really looked, I don't think we've looked at this before. We've kind of looked at the impacts and the policies that they come up with, but we don't know, we haven't done a lot of research on where do these people come from? What have they learned about when they've formed their economic ideas? And just to emphasize this lack of diversity as well, which I mentioned before, I'll just go to the next slide. So we found in our research that there were systemic barriers to studying economics, like in the UK, and we really reiterate why this is a problem. So there's less exposure to economics in non-fee paying or selective schools. So this graph, it shows you that big block on the left, that shows you people who've studied economics A-level in private schools, boys who've studied economics in private schools. Then the next column along is girls. You can see that they're girls from private schools, and then it goes downwards, boys in state schools, and then girls in state schools are the least likely to study economics A-level. And this is really important because many economics A-level students go on to then study it at university. And so if they're not even getting offered it at school, and the thing is, pre-A-level, we found you need to be giving economics as a GCSE or even before that, like the private schools and selective schools have, because very few students, they're not often are they going to want to study an A-level they've never heard of. So this is a key systemic barrier really in terms of who gets to study economics at a higher level in degree levels. Okay. There's other ones as well. So if you don't know what economics is, then why would you choose it? Okay. So when we did some focus group research in state schools in London, this is what we found. So and this is backed up by other research as well. So the belief that economics is only about money, business, and profits, and the sad fact is, it isn't, or it shouldn't be just about that. It's a social science. And over the last 40 years, in tandem with the advance of neoliberalism and the Thatcher and Reagan years, economics has become such a narrow discipline, which does just focus on graphs and models. And it wants itself to be a science, like a pure science. And this then means that, other people think of it as that, and it might put them off studying it. Okay. And there are other racialized and social factors as well to making economics a barrier. So some people of colour we spoke to said, they didn't think, there were many people of colour who were economists, or people said that it seemed like people who knew economists or worked in that sector would then become economists. And Lucy will talk about some of the sort of data we got from interviews as well about this. Okay. And just some shocking stats before I think Lucy will talk a bit. So looking at UK universities, women lecturers in economics only comprise of about a third. And then there's this leaky pipeline is what they call it. Women tend to drop off the higher up the profession you go. Certainly in universities, as you can see there, that's just over 0.25% of lecturers are women in economics, and then it goes down to 15% for professors. So again, this is really key because obviously these guys, these professors, these academics are teaching the next generation of economists, aren't they? And also these, the really highbrow academics get to influence policymaking. They advise policymakers, don't they? Or policymakers read their work. So if you've got such few women in economics, how are we ever going to have economic policies making that truly represents women's needs. You know, things like like more affordable care work, more affordable care for kids when you're working. Investment in sectors that women are overrepresented in. These policies rarely come to the forefront, do they, when we look at the budgets every year? And just got a few more here. So, and then if we break it down even more, so we had this intersectional approach. It wasn't just women. It was, okay, if you then look at minoritarized women, the numbers are even more, the numbers are fewer. So it says here only 8% of academic posts in economics in the UK were held by minoritarized women. And the last shocking stat we do have is, to our knowledge to date, there are still no Black female professors, and by Black I mean women of African or Caribbean heritage. So no Black female professors of economics employed anywhere in the UK. Okay, so it's pretty bad, really. Okay, so these are some of the systemic barriers, but I think I'll just have this on the screen and then I'll close my screen so that Lucy can sort of fill you in a bit more about what these systemic barriers are from our interview data. Okay.
Okay, thank you. Feel free to jump in at any point if I'm missing anything, Nicola. So yeah, with the book, the goal of what we were trying to achieve is being able to get the perspectives and the voices of those who are studying and also teaching in economics, to be able to understand their perspectives, their lived experiences, and kind of what they are seeing as a living person in the specialty. And so what we found was that the system of economics is fundamentally undiverse and uninclusive, and it lacks diversity in who teaches but also who studies. And this is a systemic problem that starts from, when you're at high school trying to discover what you want to do with your life, and seeing whether you're exposed to economics or not, as we've seen with whether high school options give economics as a choice to be able to study it or not. But all the way through, even into if you do end up going to study economics at university or go on to become an economist, the lack of diversity across the board, it continues. And so in this way, so according to a basic search of the research papers in the economics database, women make up only a quarter of academic economists worldwide. And economics in government and international institutions is similarly dominated by men. For example, of the 173 central banks globally, only 14 were headed by women in 2019, up from 12 the previous year. So representation at the higher levels, as well as in the introductory stages of beginning to study economics, is something that is across the board. So in this discussion about, how do we bring more people into economics, or what are the barriers from stopping women or non-white people or people from, not states, from state schools or non-fee paying schools, as well as, non-Western countries being able to study in like speak in economics and have value and being able to share their perspectives, is understanding what is economics. And that's the discussion that we had with school children. And we found that it continues that a lot of people don't really understand fully what economics is and what relevance it has to their life, or how it interacts with them in their everyday. And so we know that over 2/3 of British undergraduate economics students between 2018 and 2019 studied economics at A-level, and it's the key route into economics at university. However, half of non-selective, non-fee paying schools offered economics at A-level in 2017, compared to 3/4 of fee paying schools and 4/5 of selective non-fee paying grammar schools in the UK. So having the divide, even at the early stages of whether you have the opportunity to be able to study it or not, is where this divide begins. And as well as, discussing what is economics and how is it relevant to you, the familial role or exposure is something that also we uncovered. So in the professional interviews that we conducted as part of the book, we were able to speak with various people working in economics across the world and see what their route into economics was. And we found that a lot of the case, or quite a significant case of this, where they weren't coming from very privileged backgrounds of being able to go to private school, is that they had familial members, whether it was, mothers or fathers who were working in economics, so they were exposed to it at a young age. But also the fact is that economics is known as a mathematic subject rather than it being a social science. And so certain individuals may go, oh, it's too mathematical, it's not relevant to me, I'm not sure how it interacts with my life. And it isn't for people like me, which is something that we found that was a major factor in people being put off from studying it. So when we asked what does an economist look like, and images of men who are white and wealthy and privileged were prevalent amongst the school students that we interviewed, but as well as economists being described as being intelligent or partial middle class. And so it brings into question how relevant is what economics appears to be for a lot of people at that school stage, trying to decide whether it is relevant for them or not, because it's fundamentally not accessible. And sorry, my phone just went off. So in trying to improve the accessibility, including access to university, is a major factor of this. But when even you're studying economics at university, gender, race and class plays a massive factor in this. So the dominance of high social classes was quite apparent. And so we found that it's clear that in economics in the UK is two-tiered. There is an elite track with whiter and wealthier student cohorts going to Russell Group universities and then onto jobs with higher wages, status and power, and a second class track of poorer, more ethnically diverse students studying economics at lower status universities who subsequently find it harder to break into the world of academics and professional economics. So when we're discussing what sort of economics is relevant to everybody's lives and how are we bringing more people into studying it, it's a matter of representation. So we interviewed a US-based Black African economist, and she said that in mainstream economics, I don't see myself represented at all, or if I do, it's very much so a sort of caricature in terms of the poor, downtrodden African women. And this lack of representation, not only in who is visibly teaching or learning in the environment of universities, is a fundamental aspect of what is putting people off from studying economics. So unless we see ourselves being in the discipline, it can be off-putting. And so this is a major aspect of this, is that some students go through their whole degree having never heard of a single African economist, or for that matter, even a single female economist. Which was something that was shared by one of the interviewees, that a lack of representation, not just who is teaching or being taught, but also in the reading material and the curricula that's being taught, is that the systemic issue of it being very white dominant, it being very male, and it being very Western is continuing and struggling to break that barrier. So having these power relations in the classroom of the visibility and weight of sharing ideas being placed traditionally on men is a continuing situation, and it brings into question for those who are women or people of colour or from lower socioeconomic backgrounds, it brings into question their sense of belonging and whether they have, whether they belong in the room and whether their insights will be of value, which of course they will be because they're diverse, but it brings into question, how do we tackle this inequality within the classroom, and more severely, the open discrimination that does take place. So in 2019, the American Economic Association surveyed over 10,000 of its members and found that 47% of Black economists reported being discriminated against or treated unfairly in the profession based on their racial identity, when in comparison, 1 in 4 Asians, 1 in 6 Latinx, and 1 in 20 white surveyed respondents reported discrimination or unfair treatment, which is obviously a massive difference and a huge factor that needs to be considered when understanding what is the leaky pipeline within economics and why aren't people being included. It's because of these systemic barriers that are putting people off from studying it, and when they do study it, they receive all of these additional discriminations or feeling imposter syndrome and that they don't belong. And in this way, economics is a system of a harmful hierarchy. And this is based in the idea of what is valued in economics as a subject, is that what is deemed as acceptable economics is more focused on the neoclassical aspects of economics, which has become almost completely dominant within the university economics departments and academic research today. And it's constantly viewed as the mainstream version of economics now. So De Ippoliti estimated that just 8.1% of economists published in academic economics journals worldwide are conducting research in perspectives outside of this mainstream neoclassical approach. And so as a result, more diverse perspectives and ideas and things that don't fit into neoclassical economics are not being explored or widely given the space to be discussed as it should be. So many neoclassical economics believe that they can be objective observers of the world, but this is just simply not the case. The idea of unacceptable economics, despite the flexibility of neoclassical economics, there's a clear dividing line separating what is deemed to be legitimate and credible economic research and teaching and from what is not. So it's really important that we tackle the diversity of differing economic perspectives beyond neoclassical economics, but fundamentally, universities may not recruit non-mainstream economics, and this ultimately limits the knowledge breadth and inclusion, and as a result, much non-neoclassical economic research taking place in other disciplines has to focus in other areas other than economics, so sociology, politics, human geography. A lot of economic study is being siphoned off into these non-economics other disciplines because it's not seen as economics when it fundamentally is. So the narrowing of economics has taken place over the past 50 years, and it was really insightful speaking to one economist who's been in the sector for a really long time, and she shared that the loss of interdisciplinary economics and broader topics is something that's really saddened her. She was studying in the 1960s and found that feminist economics was a really popular topic then, or it was a lot more widely accepted within economics. And she's seen that this has been slowly siphoned out alongside other non-mainstream areas such as developmental economics. And it's just seen a real loss of relevance and applicability to wider audiences, and fewer people feel seen and represented in economics as a result. So this narrowing of economics has led to a declining diversity in perspectives, reaching wider audiences. And now we're at the point that any significant diversity of knowledge has been eradicated from many university economics departments in its entirety, because if it doesn't fit into a neoclassical system, then it's not shared. And the role of economics journals fundamentally has something to do with this, because journal editors have a significant position of power. The judgment of which articles to pick for publication is based on their view of what is good or bad quality, and this influences what economic research is recognised and value placed upon. So in this way, what is published in economics journals both reflects existing values within economics and reinforces them and the views within these. So this is a key mechanism through which the monopoly of neoclassical economics is reproduced. So in economics journals related to race, in this example, the top economics journals almost completely neglect to publish research that addresses issues of racial identity. So for an interesting statistic of this, just to show how severe the lack of diversity and being able to discuss issues within economics related to gender, race, class, that sort of thing, is between 1990 and 2018, of the 7,567 economics related articles in the top 5 economics journals, only 29 directly addressed issues related to race and or ethnicity. In that, huge span of time, only 29 articles, really shows how visibility of talking about different areas of economics just fundamentally does not happen in the bigger publishing houses. And as a result, it means that although there is more visibility in more specialist journals, there is less exposure and less impact factor as a result. And so the whole idea of the publish or perish issue for a lot of economics studies and people who are living and breathing economics is that in the academic sphere, the idea of publish or perish is a mantra faced by academics trying to progress up the career path. And so it disincentivizes them from exploring non-mainstream topics. And this is a real fundamental issue of why the whole leaky pipeline of who's being brought into economics continues to be a real issue, because this hierarchy of what is deemed valuable in economics and what is deemed less visible or too specialist or not necessarily economics is really losing its value, and there's real points to be made there. And that was something that we really saw with the interviews that took place, in that we were sharing perspectives and they were really discussing really interesting topics of areas of interest that they were looking at. So there was one economist who I spoke to for quite a while that was talking about that she was doing a archive study of one of the first black female economists and her journey, because it was a historical study, and it was focused on archival research being in libraries. And because of that, although it was fundamentally economics, because it was looking at the life and experiences of this black female economist, but because of that, she was really struggling to find funding, and there was many places that just was completely disvaluing her research because they said it wasn't economics, it was sociology, when it fundamentally was economics. It just wasn't fitting in with a neoclassical system of the way that things have been done and continue to be done at the moment. I feel like I've spoken an awful lot, so I'll pass back on to Nicola if you want to continue with your presentation.
Great, yeah, thank you, Lucy, because that just covers, yeah, pretty much everything. I just wondered, before I just say a few things more, has anyone got any comments or questions about, because there's a lot of information to take in, and when you've sort of done research for a book or anything, you sort of forget what you didn't know before you started that research. So yeah, I mean, there might be new things we've talked about today. So please do ask questions, either on the chat or put them, just say them out loud, unmute yourself. So I will go on to sort of something positive for the last section. So that's all that, this is rubbish, yes, and what can we do about it? Hi, Tanya.
I just a question about, do you see this that same trends against things like disabled people and, in other areas, characteristics? And
yeah, I mean, we admit there are so many more identities we did not have the capacity to sort of research at the time, and there is very little research done. Actually, when I was doing a search of economic papers on these other protected characteristics, there's virtually nothing about it. So there is much. This book is just a start of uncovering. We focused on those three sort of aspects, like gender, racialized identity, and social class, because we felt like they were the ones that there was data out there for. And this is the thing, we need more data. There needs to be much more qualitative and quantitative research done on this, and economists to really work with groups such as those who represent those identities that you've mentioned.
Yeah, it's really interesting in the interviews being able to discuss, the role of intersectionality and how your identity and how this continues to build on how you are discriminated against or unincluded within the economics area. Was really interesting to hear, and it's definitely something that came up a lot, and that was a significant factor of, if you do fit. If you aren't white and also Western, or from different areas of research, then you don't get included, and it's a major factor, I think, that it definitely needs more research being done into it, because it was only in our capacity, but it's definitely reassuringly there. As awful as it is to be able to say it with that degree of security, but it is there, and it is significant. And I think it would be really interesting to explore other intersectional lenses within that, and being able to see how other identities do continue to impact that aspect.
Volunteering has been very interesting from a Royal Charter perspective within professional services on a CSR level. Encouraging non-binary people to come forward has been really interesting. I work in tax, and tax is so fascinating because of the behavioural change aspects of policy and how they impact on economics. Also the myth of meritocracy, which continues to perpetuate leadership within the professional services area, and trying to find data that supports arguments against the myth of meritocracy is so important for us on this side. This has been great, by the way. Thank you so much. I'm delighted to hear that you're going to share the slides. I'll be able to take those forward. The Big Four, who are doing talent management and recruitment, are cognizant of a lot of these issues. And believe it or not, it's great to be an outsider on the inside in some of those arenas. And I will be able to use some of this. So thank you so much. Thank you. I've really enjoyed everything that I've heard so far. It's been really great. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks. It's really lovely. Thank you. I just wondered, anyone else had any questions at all? Just before I go on to like the positive things of what can we do kind of section. Rose or SHW? Anyone? Put it in the chat as well. Okay. So what I'll do is I'll just share the screen as well. It's just re-emphasising really what Lucy said. So yeah, so the key is we don't just want this, well, we want beyond tokenistic representation. So, you know, here we've got a bunch of diverse people, yes, and this is from the government's, the Government Economic Service, which is the biggest recruiter of economists, like biggest graduate recruiter of economists. And actually, it's interesting. The lady on the bottom left, where it says civil service file stream, they actually, yeah, they've been gone public with why they left the fast stream. They actually, amazing woman, Felicia, she set up the Black Economist Network to provide support for Black economists. And she just felt like, basically, when she set that up, she did so much work, and you know, it's become a massive network of people. But the civil service didn't give her any time off to do that. You know, she had to do that alongside her day job. And this is what we have to get rid of this, expecting those who are marginalised from economics to do all the legwork and the hard work to try and make it more diversified, try and make it more decolonised. Because actually it's the people who are from more privileged backgrounds, they're the ones that need to change, not people like Felicia, who, you know, comes from not a privileged background, you know. So yeah, that's one thing I really wanted to make clear. It's not enough just to have, you know, more women in economics or more, yeah, it's just not enough. We need those systemic things to change, like Lucy mentioned, and that goes right to the core of what is valued as good economics and not good economics. And also things like, yeah, we need what is taught, like Lucy mentioned this, what is taught needs to change. Through our research, we've just found it's shocking, and through the BLM protests that happened because of George Floyd's murder, you know, we discovered that economics doesn't really recognise like colonialism, and it sort of mentioned things about how countries are poor and things, or how European powers went over to these countries. It doesn't mention anything about the legacies, the long-lasting legacies of colonialism. So that's another thing we need to really engage with. And yeah, so, and there's some more ideas. I'll just leave, this would be the last, these are some recommendations that have come up from students and professionals that we interviewed. Yeah, so I mentioned before, it's not good enough just to outreach to A-level students to get them to study economics. We have to be teaching kids economic literacy way before they even choose their GCSEs. Some of the kids I spoke to who are year 8s and year 9s, so just about to choose their GCSEs, they didn't know what economics was, in the state school. And then as soon as I mentioned things like, oh, if you're interested in Greta Thunberg, in climate change, economics can help you to address that, and they're like, oh, didn't know that. I may look into it. So, we need to be getting in there, and all these organisations that work in economics and certain issue-specific economics need to be outreaching to schools, and the curriculum of economics needs to change as well to recognise these very diverse issues that economics does address, or should address, I should say. So I've mentioned things like, and Lucy's done so as well, diversified, decolonised economics. So, and some people have mentioned here before, have different people represented in the curriculum, not just in the classroom as who teaches it, but the content of what is taught. Yeah. And this links to what I mentioned just before about how our economies were created. And I'm glad to see that this has been talked about more, sadly with the death of George Floyd, but it's become, people did protest about colonialism and having statues in Bristol and things like that. And economics as a discipline needs to really recognise the role that colonialism had and still has today, and how it also affects people with heritages from colonialism. And I'll speak personally here, because from doing the research, I found all this amazing information. There's an economist called Nancy Folbert in the US, so she's done this great book about feminists and economics, and it had some history about people who my family, sort of the areas my family comes from, and I just didn't have a clue about all this economic exploitation of women in particular. So yeah, that needs to be taught in the curriculum. Yeah, so I've put here the Women's Budget Group have more examples, real world examples from groups like this. They're an amazing group. If you haven't heard of them, I'll just put them in the chat as well. I'll just get my page up for that and you can have a look at them. And they basically work on getting a gender-based economy or a gender-based budget promoted amongst policymakers. And they've done a lot of work on how women fared worse during COVID, how women and certain women from different identities fared worse during the austerity measures after the big financial crisis in 2008. So really would advise you to go and see what they're doing. And they just work with women a lot, that's their thing as well, and just give women a voice, which is amazing. So that's in the chat, I've put that. And yeah, so have role models and mentors in the department. It does make a difference, just seeing somebody that looks similar to yourself makes a huge difference. And in terms of teaching, what we've found is just avoid lecturing to people. If you've got students in a room, you've got students with different experiences. So try and tap into what, they're interested in. What do they want to learn? What are their experiences? And I mean, I say this as well, if you haven't been briefly worked in citizenship education and geography, it's common sense, isn't it? If people choose what they're going to learn in a certain subject, they'll probably pay more attention and do, be more interested in it. Yeah. And the other thing, the last thing we've got is equip learners with problem solving and transferable skills to address the current crises we face, such as climate change and post-COVID recovery. Because in economics, things like, well, they call it environmental economics, which is different to ecological economics. Environmental economics has a more sort of conservative neoclassical approach. That is often only an optional module. Yeah, just like feminist economics is an optional module. So we need to have these modules and these choices of what people study in their degree. It has to be part of the core curriculum as well.
One of the most extraordinary aspects of going out into secondary schools in Hackney on a tax brief, because that's the area that I work in, is how much do you earn this? How much do you earn? And recognising that whilst that wasn't the question that I wanted to answer. Sharing how much chartered tax advisors, chartered accountants, chartered economists and others, that created a lot of excitement. And talking to firms who are very, very keen to deliver on representation, and who say horrible things like, we really need 10% of BAME school leavers who are female to join the ranks in economic areas of professional services. There is some currency, I think, for change. Those are just my observations. I hope you find them helpful.
Yeah, I mean, it's good that they are starting to change that. But I think it sort of, we have to look at it. It's not just tokenism, though. We can't just have like.
Oh no, that's a disaster.
Yeah, because I think the Government Economics Service, they had a scheme called GIG, Gender in the GES or something. And again, it was just mostly up to women to sort of organise these talks and things. And the thing is as well, like with, I think like Lucy mentioned, it's not just a case of getting more brown people or black people in, it's, you have to look at their other identities. So like you said, if you're like, because you can get rich and privileged black and brown people who will have gone to private schools. So we need more data on that as well. There isn't that data. Very few universities we sent freedom of information requests to had that intersectional data. Mm-hmm. So it was difficult to make broad generalizations of the Russell Group universities we asked.
Rishi Sunak is the best example of race no longer being an indication of class. And you're right, I think the mentoring that we do has been very much around the fact that we're taking developmental graduates and saying, don't work in NGOs, work in Monsanto, work in, really powerful organizations that need your outlook and representation. And I think those outsiders on the inside, that's a very powerful use of those academics. But gosh, it's a huge struggle, and everything that you've presented today just suggests how much of a struggle it is. I suppose it's trying to find as many routes to that representation, which, as you say, is so important. I speak as a Jewish single mother from Hackney.
Yeah. I think something else that I forgot to mention actually, which was something that was really significant, that it's not even just outside of a Western focus. So from a British perspective or a UK or a US perspective, the difference between whether you studied or grew up and experienced and were taught economics and work within the economic sphere within the Western world, you are at a significantly distinct advantage. So, for example, we were speaking with I was speaking with professionals in economics who work in South Africa, and I remember one of the ladies, they were talking to me and saying that when they were teaching or learning at university in South Africa about kind of what sort of programs that were included within university teaching in the curriculum, they were being taught about how the economic systems within the US works or how the economic systems within the UK works. And this happened with a couple of different examples of like developing countries where they've been taught economics, but they were barely taught about the economic systems of their own country that they live and work in. And so this distinct disadvantage of not only learning about your own economic systems of your home country and being able to apply them into developing the economic systems within where you live is reinforces this idea of like Western economics is king. And it's really interesting being able to see the perspectives of that. And when you want to talk about things that are relevant to your own country, like unpaid labor or informal economies and the role that informal economies are a huge part of developing country economies that are just not taught about in economics. And this is even a significant factor, not only if it happens in your home country, but also the fact that in the US or UK curriculums, you're not taught about it either. And that's just it's so Western focused that it's really missing out on opportunities to diversify what you understand as economics.
And
So
access is one, sorry.
No, go on.
Such a key access is such a key aspect of that, because it's only when a Bengali Brick Lane female studies anthropology at Cambridge and says, well, hang on a minute, this is a little bit weird. I'm being taught this in a way that I want to challenge, that you start to affect the curriculum. Exactly. Unless more diverse representation is happening across the humanities and across the social sciences, that core curriculum is going to persist, isn't it? Yeah, it's a very circular, sorry, sort of circular. I nearly wanted to say economy then, but that is an aspect of it. Thank you.
Just wondered if anyone else had any questions at all before I explain those websites that I've put up, just as a positive spin on what we've said those websites are. Anyone got any more questions? Yeah.
Sorry, I keep coming in.
I would like you to come in.
I'm based in Wales, and the Welsh Government obviously have been shifting towards adopting a more economy that's more favoured towards wellbeing economics, and have connected with other smaller economies in general, like Finland, New Zealand, Iceland, Scotland, and governments there to create a network to explore some of these issues. What is worrying is, though, that the research base that they're trying to shift, they're obviously trying to shift an economy that moves from GDP to something that is far more reflective of what we actually mean by well-being, and well-being in that broadest sense, from sort of planetary well-being right through to individual health and well-being. And I suppose I find it worrying that actually the research isn't out there to help them in that, but in their own right, they could be commissioning research that would enable and help them to achieve that. I don't know, where might we want them to start pointing their research leverage?
So have you heard of WEAL?
I'm a member. Yeah, I'm a member.
Yeah. So I would say, though, for even things like the Feminist Green New Deal, that's another one. So have you heard of that one that's been released in the UK about 2 years ago? So they're focusing on, rather than the Green New Deal just being focused on like male-dominated areas, care work is really, it makes up a big proportion of like expenses in the economy and things. So I would say, though, you probably have to go to those niche journal articles if you're going to get this kind of more like well-being centered research. The ones, unfortunately, they're not being picked up by the mainstream kind of journals or departments where which are seen as being the best departments in the world. So I would say there is starting to be research in there, though. You just have to, I don't know if you've got the problem is getting access to it, because I'm lucky I teach at uni, so I can do that. I would say as well, even like places like the Resolution Foundation, they are doing more on that as well. And the link I put there, the last one, Economy, so it's ECNMY. They've worked with the Welsh Government, actually, the chief exec, who's a co-author of this book, Joe Earle. He has been advising Welsh ministers and Welsh Government about like a more democratised economics for people, focusing on matters that they actually deal with and want governments to focus on. So if you haven't seen their work, I'd really say go to their website. They deliver as well like economic literacy training for people, so that people can feel confident to even engage with policymakers about economic issues.
Thank you.
Anyone else has any questions or comments? Or anything new you found out tonight? Or actually, the last question I will say is, have your opinions changed of who would you then like to see as an economist, and what would they be looking at now? What economics would they focus on? Has that changed at all? Put that in the chat as well. Yay. Want to see passionate young women in economics. Thank you, Abby. Anyone else at all? I mean, I think what's good is, I think, like even with things like the climate justice movement, Greta Thunberg, or, sadly with the BLM, the thing that ignited the BLM movements, it's got people talking about these issues, hasn't it? I don't think we've ever really talked about diversity, decolonising, and justice, climate justice, social justice, to this extent. And I think if there's anything that's hopeful, is younger people are growing up with that information. Whereas, I do remember there being a lot of protests against Maggie Thatcher and poll tax, but we didn't have a lot of those connective tools to use. Don't know if you want to say anything else as well, Lucy. It's just
yeah, I think the fact that discussions are happening is always a good thing, and being able to have more knowledge at our hands now, I guess, with the internet, and being able to connect more closely with people, I think, and sharing other perspectives other than those that would otherwise just be in your immediate circle or your bubble. I think there's hope for change. Whether it happens or not is another matter, but I think being hopeful and doing what we can to kind of continue to raise awareness of these things that we talk about in the book. It's so important to be able to say, well, this is actually what's happening, and this is what we can do about it. And it allowing it to then that information being out there may well change the thought process of one person or a bunch of people, but it's having these sorts of conversations, which I think is key to making change, because it's awareness, and once you're aware of something, you're more likely to notice in day-to-day life where there's opportunities for going towards a more diversified or democratized or decolonised world, as well as specifically within economics.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm not just plugging the book here, but there are sections in the book that like kind of explains economics, like key foundations, like key ideas in economics. And as I said before, I'm not an economist. Like my thing was like politics and anthropology, and qualitative research. But even just reading those explanations in the book, they're written in a way to try and grab people who, haven't studied economics, and I found some of those terms really confusing as well when I first read them. But after a few reads, it's like, oh, that's what they're talking about when they come up with this, whatever word it was, some jargon in economics. So then if you're armed with that, you can then question these views. And I found it really useful. Say when I'm quite active in the local community in terms of like the environmental issues here. So when I've gone to council meetings, I feel so much more confident, using these terms and sort of really critiquing them, to show them, look, I know just as much as you, if not more. And I think, because our book mentions how local democracy, local economic democracy can happen. So that's my main suggestion, really.
Yeah, I think that's a major thing that was really important for me in particular when we were writing it, was that accessibility has to be key, because the whole argument of the book is that, so many people are being kept out of economics, so they don't see how it's relevant to their life, or they don't see themselves physically as economists, or think that economics is relevant to them in their life, because the building blocks of understanding what is economics and how does it impact you in your day-to-day life, because it does affect everybody in different ways, and having that accessibility of explaining, what this is and this is what it means for you, for other people around you. It's so important that that sort of discussion is accessible, because that then challenges the whole issue of the fact that there's only very certain specific types of people being able to have that accessibility in economics. So I think it's very fundamental that we make it as accessible as possible.
Okay, great. I think, yeah, it's sort of an hour on the screen now, isn't it? I think, yeah, if you've worked from home or just gone on these events, I think it's, yeah, probably time to wrap up. Unless we've got any final questions, any comments at all.
Mine was an ask, really.
Yeah, sure.
Whilst you're here, and I have tried to link with you on LinkedIn, so hopefully you'll pick that up. I'm a coach, and I coach people who work in sustainability, wellbeing, and sort of social, social good, areas of social good. And I'm connected with a couple of networks, with the Women in Sustainability Network, which has just published its own research that it's done with Newcastle University about how the challenges that women face who work in the sustainability sector, which is that they feel heard but not listened to, so they've got a lack of influence. And so a lot of what you said isn't surprising, because it is very much, but that would be, and another one is the Climate Coaching Alliance, which is a global alliance of over, I think it's over 3,000 coaches, and it was just an invitation. I don't know, whether you would be able to speak to one or other of those at some point, because I'm sure they would be fascinated by what your book is and your findings are. Or if not, if there's stuff I can share with them that we might circulate. You don't have to answer me now because I've put you completely on the spot, but it would be great if perhaps we could offline have a chat about how we can take and share SailorMesh, because I think, like I said, in Wales, there's we've got a Future Generations Commissioner here, and I think there's a lot in here that needs to be listened, that people need to listen from, read your writing.
Great. Well, thank you. I've put my email address. The only thing is I was right to get in touch soon, because I'm actually leaving RE next week. So, but I can. I'm going to hopefully go into more environmental stuff actually as well. But I think I've just learned so much from doing this research, and certainly, do get in touch. I'll try and certainly send resources to you that we have that would be useful. And that goes for everyone as well. Yeah, if there's some information that you missed. Great. Okay, lovely. I'll take that as well.
Thank you. Yeah, I'll definitely be in touch before you go. So and just to say thank you for all the work, because I know how hard writing a book must be. I can anticipate the fingers being, raw. More the typing, but
especially in lockdown. Well, actually in lockdown it was quite a nice thing to do. We had something to do. But I mean, I think as well, like somebody mentioned as well, like about is there anything in economists looking at the environment, and I think I just wanted to say it's like a really tricky situation. I think it's a bit concerning, I think, because I've done some research on ecological economics as well, and you probably know more about this than me, Tanya, but there seems to be a focus on looking at economics, environmental services and natural capital, which monetizes nature, doesn't it? And it doesn't view things like indigenous views of nature and how it's working with nature rather than against it. So I really hope that there's more courses coming out. Like there's one at Barcelona. They've got one on degrowth, and it's a master's level course, but it's a lot cheaper than what you get in the UK, and it's like more affordable, and they really are quite radical in their approaches, which you don't really get here as much. So that's a good sign that these people are coming and developing these ideas.
I think the coaching community is definitely going through a shift with talking about the ecology, how you take the concept of ecology into places like coaching, and they're coaching leaders. And if more and more coaches are starting to challenge leaders, or how do they bring the ecologies into their conversations, and that ecology is meant as a term of connection and interconnection and transconceptual, how we consider things in different contexts. is really important. And maybe there is, you know, if that's happening, we can get a movement in all of these places where leaders develop and they change and that starts shifting, then that's really important. But yeah, it's just devastating to hear that the university research environment is so limited.
Yeah, I mean, it's just, I mean, I think in my view, it would be core for everyone, you know, because it's a massive catastrophe some people already experience and we will face soon. So yeah, and linking it into human aspects, it's not just for privileged middle class people, you know, and when you see who gets affected, obviously, by climate change now, yeah, it's mostly Black and brown people in poor countries.
Exactly.
And so people here who are from immigrant families will have relatives there. So we need to sort of get that human connectivity, like you said, of how can we make it more a universal issue that taps into everyone's needs and interests, and not just have it be like, you know, your Monty Dons out there, or, you know, kind of like your privileged landowners who want to protect the environment. Yeah. So
yeah.
Yeah.
But even looking closer to home, the research shows that those people who are less privileged, you know, socioeconomically disadvantaged, are the ones that are going to be impacted more by both, you know, the physical changes that will happen, the floods, the climatic changes will impact them, but equally the sort of the on cost through health, impacts on health, because they are already less resilient. You know, they don't have the same sort of resilience that other, you know, that more privileged people have. It's shocking. There we are.
Definitely.
Thank you.
Yeah, great. Okay, thank you. It's been really interesting. I'm so glad that people have been engaged as well and put all the comments on the chat. It's been really nice to see them. And I forgot to say, I know some of you already bought the book, but if you still haven't, there is this, we've got this code you can put in that makes it a little bit cheaper to buy the book. And I think we've got a book page, which I will put up on here. We've got another event as well, which is on this book page, which I will share with you. That's next Tuesday. It's actually in King's Cross. Unfortunately, the tickets have got sold out, but we will be live streaming that event. There'll be different speakers there. Myself and Lucy will be there, but we might be talking about something slightly different. And there'll be the other co-author, Joe, who does the whole democratising economics in the community work. He'll be there. And a contributor called Francesca, who looks at the gendered and racialized impacts of economic policy making. So yeah. So thank you, everyone. Been great. Yeah, Lucy, do you want to say last words?
Yeah, just it's been really great to hear everybody's thoughts, and it's just lovely to be able to, after all the hard work for the past few years of getting this book out, it's just really nice to finally have some feedback and see that people are engaging with it, which is, you know, wonderful, and the whole point of why we did what we did, which is amazing. So yeah, thank you for attending and being so active.
Great. I think we'll wrap it up there now. I think yeah, so have a lovely evening, everyone, and really hope it will inspire to reclaim economics as well. Okay, take care. Bye.
Thanks.